What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favale coming at you with the one, the only Mort Jensen of the NBA podcast fame, of Yahoo Sports fame, of Forbes fame, and of OnlyFans celebrity. We are going to go through our biggest questions for every team in the NBA in the offseason over the next few weeks. We're going to roll them out by division so that we can really get into just some nitty-gritty stuff, spend a few extra minutes rather than having to do like 2 or 3 minutes on each team. These will be great companion episodes to Grant and myself are previewing the offseason for every single team individually. Go check out those podcasts, those videos, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your stuff. And look, if you have not subscribed to the show yet, please do so. And if you have not left us a rating or review, help the show get exposure. And if you've done all those things, I would humbly ask, and I don't ask every episode now, but humbly ask that share us, tell people about us, spread the good word that is Hardwood Knocks, and you can also join our Discord. The link to that is in the YouTube and podcast description. With 60 seconds of that out of the way, Mort, how the heck are you?
I'm doing well. I just want to give the listeners a follow-up here because, you know, also, if you do all the things that Dan just said, remember, if you meet Dan in the streets, give him a hug, give him a kiss with tongue, if necessary. Just be polite, be good. Give all you can for this great person who makes a shit ton of great content.
You're making me blush right now. So I just want to say thank you. Did you have any thoughts or wanted to note anything about how we went about this? We each prepared our own question for each team. Just our biggest question that we're sort of ruminating on. Right. Is there anything you wanted to note about your approach?
Well, they're overarching, really. Like, you know, they're always going to be like nitty-gritty questions that fan bases are looking at. But I'm going to take the major questions instead, not because it's just the popular question to ask, because I think if you start big, we can always dig down small instead. I think that's the better approach.
Which, a spoiler alert, that's kind of how I approached this. So you sent me your questions, so I decided some of them I had like the same ones. And so I was like, well, I'm going to go a little bit more micro, where he goes macro. And I think that'll provide a nice little balance for us. And with that in mind, how do we feel about getting started with, we didn't note this yet, but it'll be in the title, so you should know, the Southwest Division. The Dallas Mavericks, Mort. What is your biggest question? Tell the audience.
Well, I mean, obviously, we know whether we know the answer to this question from our perspective. It is, should you keep the number 1 pick or should you trade it? We would like the Dallas Mavericks to keep it because that's the smart play. However, I will concede here that the question is valid because you traded away Luka Doncic and you said, we are in it to win it now. Like, our window is right now. We feel that we are a more competitive group now than before when we had Luka Doncic. First and foremost, that is obviously wrong, but that's what they said. And in order for them to not lose face, which, Dan, you and I know how much NBA teams care about not losing face, you at least have to have the conversation about, would we lose face if we actually go out there and pick a teenager? Because that's going to set back our timeline, and it's going to make us essentially liars for the whole reason for why we traded away Luka Doncic. So that's why I'm asking, keep the number 1 pick or trade it?
I do think it's a fair question based off how the Mavs have operated. I do believe they'll keep it. They've said the rumors are that they will keep it, and I would be shocked if they didn't. I don't even know the player that you would move the pick for. Giannis is the one that is mentioned,
right.
And even you could tell me it's anyone, basically. Giannis would be, he's a top 3, top 5 NBA player. You just traded away one of those two, but that's neither here nor there. Kyrie's going to be out until January or whatever. So it just feels like making that type of a home run swing would be ill-conceived.
Yeah.
So, and look, if you believe that, and the other thing, by the way, like Nico Harrison was harping on, you know, wouldn't it have been hysterical had Jaren Jackson Jr. been Supermax eligible and he got the Supermax when the Mavs didn't want to give it to Luka? That would have just been such a weird juxtaposition. But Nico Harrison has made kind of a big deal about affordable contracts or not wanting to pay certain types of guys. Cooper Flagg on a rookie scale. We filter out rookie scales when we do best contracts in the league, but it has the potential to just be one of the 2 or 3 best contracts in the league because his cost is so repressed relative to the salary cap. I would be honestly floored if they looked at moving the pick. And to be honest, even more honest, like someone's head needs to roll if they trade the pick. They need to. The Dumonts need to sell the team. Nico Harrison needs to. Like, I just don't. I don't even know that trading for Giannis would be the right decision here. I would rather see them be trading Anthony Davis because they won the number 1 pick, which I also don't think that they're going to do.
Right. No, look, you and I are in agreement. They should do this. They should basically say, look, we're starting over. But that's the thing. They're not going to do that. They're going to try to have one foot in each camp, right? They're going to have a foot in the 19-year-old Cooper Flag camp and then another foot in the Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving camp, and nothing's going to make sense. So I'm wondering, like, this is basically the best excuse for any organization to say, oh, we can reset our timeline. I wonder how long it will take for this, let's just be completely honest here, incompetent franchise to realize when is the time. Wait, like, should we do this now? Yes, you should. You should basically trade Anthony Davis right now. It's not going to happen, but I think it's an interesting subplot. And like, if they are married to the idea of Anthony Davis, because I think, again, there's a PR battle to lose here if you're pivoting off Davis and then right after having making a big fuss about, oh, he's better than Luka. He's like the guy who's like better to get in here. By the way, side note, I don't know if you've seen this. Luka was attending the Real Madrid game the other day. I don't know if you saw the pics.
Was he with like the Jokic brothers or something? I don't know.
He was not, but dude's in shape. Dude's big time in shape. Like proper in shape. That's a very funny subplot to be, by the way. But yes.
The biggest offseason addition for the Lakers will be Luka Doncic having visible abs. That will be calling right now.
Exactly. So like this is just such a weird team. Like they like Nico Harrison turned them so weird. Now you have to like figure out what's the next step here. Can we justify it to the fan base to trade like Anthony Davis? Look, whatever you do, by the way, if you're Nico Harrison, the fan base still wants you gone. Like that's never gonna turn. So, but like I just think it's such a weird position they found themselves in.
So we're both in agreement that they should keep the pick. I actually believe they will. Do you believe they will?
Yeah, I think cooler heads will prevail. Yes.
What I want to know then, can they get another primary ball handler? Do they have the assets to do so? Do they have the gall to do so? And can they game it so that whoever they acquire can play alongside Kyrie Irving when he comes back? And I think, look, I know the Kyrie contract, the player option, that might be something people want to dig into, and Grant and I will get into it when we do the Mavs offseason look ahead. But, like, he's not going anywhere. I don't know what the contract looks like, but he's going to be on the Dallas Mavericks next season. So I just find that not as intellectually curious as, well, this team needs. I mean, maybe they give a lot, like, they can plumb the depths of what Cooper Flag could do in that role. But if you want to be competitive right away while also having Cooper Flag, I don't think you want to put that type of responsibility on his shoulders alone.
Correct. Mark Stein has apparently mentioned, oh, let me see if I get this right. Hang on.
Oh, I can tell you who he mentioned.
Yeah, I have it here. Drew Holiday, Chris Paul, and Lonzo Ball. Lonzo is by far the most intriguing option, also from a like financial perspective, because he's only earning like $10 million, I believe it is, next season. Yeah. And he's like the big guard, also defensively oriented. He can play make. You can play him with multiple ball handlers. The thing about him, obviously, is the same question that hovers around Anthony Davis and even Kyrie Irving to this extent now, is availability. Can he play over the course of a full season, or is he limited to playing 25, 35 games? Like, look, at this point, if Lonzo settles in for 41 games, like half a season, that's a win in my book. So, again, it comes down to like, what are your expectations also financially? Because Drew Holiday is going to cost a ton on the books. He's at like what, 35 million per year along those lines.
He like the defense, like he fits their defensive motif, and he could play off Kyrie. And what I'd be worried about with Lonzo is that feels like to me an accessory move, because even if he's healthy, how many minutes can he play?
Right. Yeah, and that's a legitimate question. What I'm asking you is, if you're going after Drew Holiday, what's the deal? Like, because you have to give up.
So I have a deal. mapped out.
All right.
I actually wrote about one before this report came out. So is this based off my speculation? Who's to say? Really? Am I Mark Stein's insider? I'm not, but maybe I am. Who knows? So it would be, you would have to involve a third team because neither the Mavericks or the Celtics are going to want to be hard capped or take back more money than they send out, and they functionally, the Celtics cannot do that.
Right.
So Dwight Powell, that $4 million player option, he goes to the Nets, and they get Portland's 2026 second-round pick. I think the Celtics have that as part of the deal. The Mavs send P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford to Boston, and then Drew Holiday goes to Dallas.
Wait, you bring me the names again. P.J. Washington and who?
Daniel Gafford to Boston for Drew Holiday. And both of those guys, for anyone wondering, they are on expiring contracts. And then my thought process there, just really quickly, is that doesn't really save Boston a lot of money. But like if they were trying to be good, PJ Washington soaking up the Jason Tatum defensive minutes, like just positionally makes a lot of sense. But I also think you've now broken up Drew Holiday into smaller contracts that can then be moved individually for more value and save you additional money. It's
a lot of size you lose there, but like you're getting Cooper Flag in there as well. So perhaps it's enough. Like for Dallas, I mean, you have Derek Lively.
Right. And I want to be clear. I don't think PJ Washington is suddenly expendable, but if you have Cooper Flag, Najee Marshall, Anthony Davis, Derek Lively, you can probably stand, like you would be able to survive getting rid of Gafford and PJ Washington. It's just, if you think Drew's contract is that much underwater, that's where it gets hung up. But Gafford's probably gone anyway after this year if you don't move him. And then PJ Washington's eligible for a 4-year, I think it's like an $89 million extension, that's fine money for him. But again, how much do you want him on the roster when you have AD, when you have Cooper Flag?
Right. Yeah. No, I don't hate it. If there was a cheaper option out there, I wouldn't hate exploring that, but that's not a bad deal for Drew at all.
I don't really have, there are other names they could try and I'm trying to think of like super cheap, but this isn't something they're going to fix by, we got Tyus Jones at the minimum. I guess Chris Paul would make a lot of sense. I don't want to see him playing with Kyrie too much, although maybe they have the defensive infrastructure at this point to cover up for him. But Chris Paul would be kind of as a stopgap if you're using the mini MLE or if he's agreeing to come for the minimum. That would certainly, like, that streamlines Cooper Flag's development, allows you to get Anthony Davis the ball in the spots that he needs to get them. I like that one. Maybe that one feels like the one that straddles the most amount of ground, where it's temporary, but it makes
San Antonio though. He loves being in San Antonio.
But we're going to get to the Spurs. But if they have Steph Castle, De'Aaron Fox, and Dylan Harper on their team,
we'll get to it. I have a take.
Anything else on the Mavericks or any names you want? Kobe White would be interesting, but he's about to get paid and costs a lot in assets. And playing him and Kyrie, you could.
I don't think he's gonna. No, look again. The Bulls are stuck here. No, I'm not. No, that wasn't one of my rants. The Bulls are stuck. Is basically what I'm saying. They know that they had to basically let him go into unrestricted free agency in 2026. He's only got 1 year left. They could have cashed in big time at the trade deadline. I think they cost themselves. Like, they made the same mistake with Caruso, and like all they got back from Caruso was Josh Giddey and nothing. So like, I think teams out there are not going to overpay for Kobe White because of the contractual situation. Because if you trade for Kobe White now, you're facing the same issue that Chicago is.
Yeah.
So he's not going to cost you a ton, I think.
That is fair, and I do think it will end with them either moving him for dissatisfactory value, or they end up paying his next deal that does not age.
Correct.
Well, that would be my official prediction. Any other names you'd want to throw off? But I think, I guess we didn't really answer the question. Do you think that they will go out and be aggressive enough to get someone who is, it's not just, we got Trey Jones or we got Tyus Jones, like it's someone who makes more of an impact of that? Or do you expect them more to just kind of balance their cap sheet out and buy time until Kyrie gets back in
No, I absolutely think they're going to look for a serious ball handler, because look, Kyrie is also on the older side as an NBA player, and that is a horrific injury. Like, we don't know how he comes back from that at that age. Like, if a young guy gets an ACL tear, okay, look, that now it shows that at most come back and are fine. At that age, with a lot of mileage on him as well, I just don't think we can sit here and assume that he'll be himself. We can hope so, but we can't assume. And I don't think the Mavs are either.
Let's move on to our next team, which we're going to go alphabetically here. The Houston Rockets, maybe the single most fascinating team of the offseason, or at least one of the five most. I'm gonna steal this. Well, let's go with your question. You took the overarching stuff, which is fun to talk about. So, what is your question for Houston?
The big question is it time to trade for a star, or should they just run the course as they did this season? And the reason I ask it is because they had this conversation brewing even last summer as well. And I was one of the few people who were like, don't make a trade right now. See what happens with your young team. See if there are any developments that actually make you smarter about your own players and makes it much more obvious who's like in for the long haul and who shouldn't be. I think they're smarter. I think they know who they are. I think they've identified certain players who are absolute keepers or who has the most trade value, depending on how you want to look at it. So they are at a point now where they have to figure out, do we try to take like one aggressive step forward and trade for a real star, or do we keep this train trucking?
It's an enviable position to be in. It's not an easy one because I think there's cases to be made on both sides. And as someone who was taking the 10,000-foot view of it all, I would say I don't want to see them go balls to the wall for the wrong player, just any player.
Right.
But look at like I keep coming back to this. These windows always just shut way sooner than you think, even if you don't make the all-in. Look at Boston. Like that was an extended window, and they reshaped it over time. The Jason Tatum injury happens, and now their next 2 seasons maybe, just because you don't know what you have to figure out what Tatum looks like when he comes back in 26, 27. That could be out the window and force a reorientation of their entire roster. So you don't just want to sit and bank on you getting to the point where we could beat the Thunder in a series. We have enough offensive creation. Like that's the thing is you look at their offensive numbers, they need shooting, someone who can kind of run things for them. But the issue that I keep coming back to with them, why I think that I would be a little bit more desperate if I'm in Houston's situation, to me, there's nobody on the roster that checks the boxes that they need. And the only one who comes close, and this kind of gets into my question, it's Reed Sheppard. And can you just say, hey, Reed Sheppard's going to play a bunch next year after not playing this year and going to be the exact player that we need? As a Reed Sheppard optimist, I don't know that I would even say that. So that's what's really tough is that, okay, they have so much at their disposal. There's still so much room for these guys to grow. But Rockets fans can get in the comments. They could let me know, like, who is the player that you think, aside from Reed Sheppard, who, if that's the plan for next season, I'll support it because I love Reed Sheppard. But, like, that's really risky. Who is the player on this team that you think is going to turn into the guy that can run a playoff level above average offense? Because it's not like Şengün has his limitations there. You need someone else who works from the outside in. And if you still think Jalen Green is going to be the answer, I need to know which basketball you're watching that I'm not.
Yeah. Yep. And of course, Amin Thompson, we still have the overarching questions about his shooting capabilities. Like, he's obviously fantastic. I would argue right now he's probably the best player on the team. Defensively, a budding superstar, one of the best slashers in the NBA, one of the most ridiculous athletes we've probably seen in years. But, like, does he have the floor game? That's what I have to.
And even if he does, and I know they are different players in many different functional ways, but like that's kind of like, Giannis. And I don't think you even want Giannis to be the guy who's driving your half-court offense in the playoffs.
Right.
Like, you're okay with it, but like, no, that's why they traded for Dame. And that we could, we don't need to relitigate that. I was in support of the move when they did it. It was obviously risky. But like, even if Amin Thompson hits his 99th percentile outcome, I don't think that includes like someone who's hitting these pull-up jumpers and hitting these three-pointers. Like, we just don't see guys improve in volume and efficiency by such stark margins when it's such an inherent limitation of their game.
Right.
That's not an insult to him. Giannis Antetokounmpo is one of the 5 most valuable players in the NBA for like the past decade. So I would, again, I'm not, whether you think it's Devin Booker, should they go after a Kevin Durant? Is there any names that you think fly under the radar there?
Oh, you just stole my name. You stole my name. That was Book. Book is because he's the guy with the floor game. He's the guy who I think you can ask to create a substantial amount of work off the bounce, not because he's the point guard, but because he's a good decision maker. Like, he can play pick and roll. He can initiate the offense, but he can also play off the ball. He can also be a guy who goes out and gets you literally 70 because we've seen it before. He's that dude. And that would be the fun acquisition for the Rockets. The question, of course, there being, what's the deal? Because if you give up half the roster, do you just become the new Suns? You don't want to do that. And that I think is honestly the biggest threat to this whole situation of, trading for a star. Do you give up too much? Do you give up like half the farm and are suddenly left with too few players on the roster where it makes sense? That's where you get into like, did we just over course correct? There has to be a middle ground in terms of who you're getting.
I don't know if even Booker is that option, because I guess you could argue that since they own control some of the Suns' own draft, it would maybe be easier to get him for less net assets than if you were trading for somebody else. But like, it also could just cost you a crap ton. And it's, do you kind of look at, is there a player that straddles the middle ground of this is going to cost us not 4 first-round picks or something? And that's the tricky part of all this, is because there's probably no, like, they would be, if you could get this player for no, this wasn't the Donovan Mitchell package. This was more like, I'm trying to think of like which star was just traded for kind of a blah return. Almost like
Luka Doncic.
That's so mean, Anthony Davis, but it's also true. But like, if Trae Young would be the middle ground to where he's so ball dominant, sure, they could insulate him defensively. And no, would he be my first choice? No, but if it's, Atlanta just wants like 2 firsts or something than a young player, then that's a lot more appealing than 4 first-round picks and young players for Devin Booker plus making the salaries work.
So making the salaries work, I was looking at this. Dylan Brooks and Jalen Green, that was the deal I was thinking of. Unfortunately, it seems as though that is not doable because the Suns will take on more money. Basically,
any trade they make is just going to rope in like a 3rd and 4th team to take on money with Phoenix.
It has to. Like, there's no other way to go about this.
Do you think there's anything to the effect of, what if they just brought in a shooter that would crack their playoff rotation? Do you think that provides enough of the outlet to where, hey, we don't need to go make where Cam Johnson would be a good example here.
Or
and
Kobe White.
Kobe White would be, honestly, he might be perfect. You now have to deal with his next contract at a time where, okay, is Şengün still on the books? And then Jabari Smith Jr. and Tari Eason have new deals that are coming up. But yeah, he would be, and that shouldn't cost you nearly as much as a Devin Booker, as a Kevin Durant, as a Trae Young, like the whole 9.
He's obviously not on that level as the players you just mentioned, but he's like closer to it, from a financial perspective, at least, where it makes sense to go after him. And the question to me,
go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Because what it leads me to ask, and I've asked this question about the Orlando Magic before. How good does the offense does the primary offensive upgrade need to be to get the Rockets to where they need to go? And what I know that's a convoluted way of saying it, but could you trade for a Kobe White and then just win the title next year? Or if you want to enter that inner circle, does it need to be someone who is actually on that all-star, all-NBA level?
Well, so to answer that question, I need to ask you a question first. Will Jalen Green still be on the roster? Because, it sounds like a horrible way to like initiate this conversation, but like, if you have serious aspirations of winning an NBA championship, one of the foundational mainstays in all NBA championship winners is that you have a significant portion of players who are significantly outperforming their contracts, meaning that their output, production, whatever you want to call it, is flat out worth more than what they're being compensated personally. Now, Jalen Green is going to earn $33.3 million next year, then $36 million after that. Is there any world wherein he does not immediately become a net negative in terms of like the production / compensation ratio? I would make it a priority if I get Kobe White in there to find a new home for Jalen.
I think I might make it a priority in like any type of, short of, I guess, if they go the Giannis route, you don't need to prioritize that as much. But I don't think his contract will be so underwater that it's, we need first-round picks to take it on. But inserting it into a deal, it's not part. I don't think it's part of the outgoing value to another team.
Right. And that's kind of where I'm at, because if you are entering next season with Jalen Green earning $33 million, and you have championship aspirations, financially speaking, you're gonna be in for a hard time. That like you're gonna put so much pressure on every single rookie contract left on that roster to like play at a ridiculous level above their compensation model. Same with the Şengün, honestly.
Yeah, that is a good point. I want to get to my question, which I think it
Yeah.
bleeds into what we're talking about. Are any of the younger guys no longer part of the future plans? And I think you mentioned Jalen Green.
Yeah.
I think, Jabari Smith Jr. and Tari Eason are both extension eligible. And when you look at kind of how the Rockets were playing, where we saw a lot of triple big stuff or quad big, depending on how you feel about like Tari Eason playing. Is Jabari Smith Jr. any less important if you think that they're going to bring back Steven Adams and run that way? Or is it just having Amen Thompson there? There's also, well, how important would Jabari Smith Jr. be moving forward anyway? That's the name that I would circle, along with Cam Whitmore, is sort of, not that they need to get rid of these guys, but as you're thinking about their next contracts coming up, are they willing to move them for what? Like, here's a good example. Would you move Jabari Smith Jr. as part of a Kevin Durant deal? Kevin Durant's older. But Jabari Smith Jr. feels... I think Jabari Smith Jr. is really good. I want to make that clear. But he feels somewhat superfluous
redundant
on this roster. I don't want to say dispensable because that just has the negative connotation. So, like, those are kind of the names. And then also, not that they should give up on this guy, but, like, what is the plan with Reed Shepherd? Because you have immediate aspirations. He doesn't have the runway to develop like some of these other guys did. And we know that the Rockets have brought in basically all of their young guys along fairly. Jalen Green's like the lone exception. I feel like he was inserted into the fire right away, but everyone else, Amen Thompson, Alperen Şengün, Cam Whitmore, maybe Jabari Smith Jr. not so much. But like a lot of these guys have come along gradually. But how do you integrate Reed Shepherd into a team that might just be good enough to contend for a title? That's really challenging.
So you and I differ on our love for Jabari Smith Jr. I think I'm lower on him than you are, so I would not have any issues pivoting off of him. I think some people are basically saying, oh well, he could be a superior version than Lauri Markkanen. You're Lauri Markkanen with defense. I just don't think we've seen the offensive volume to a point where, over the course of 3 seasons, by the way, and 200 games, that's not nothing, to a point where I feel comfortable, penciling him in as a major offensive contributor. Like, do I think there's defensive upside? Yes, I do. Do I think he struggles with other big man stuff? Do I think his rebounding is meh? Absolutely. Do I think he hits enough threes to be worth the squeeze? Nope, not really. Does he hit enough of his 2-pointers to be worth it? Nope, not either. Like, there are just so many red flags to a point where I'm pretty out on him as like a major component to an offensive structure. So if you include him in a deal, and if a receiving team looks at Jabari Smith and goes, oh my God, that's a tremendous asset, pull that trigger immediately if you're Houston. That's where I'm at. As for Cam Whitmore, I just want to get this thing through, because there are teams out there. There are a lot of teams out there that should be calling the Rockets about Cam Whitmore. The thing is, because they can't sit there and say, oh, well, we love Cam. We're like, he's a major piece of what we're doing. No, he's not. He played 16 damn minutes this year. No, he's not. Like, the counter argument is right there. You didn't even utilize him. He should have played over Jalen Green for extended stretches this year. He didn't. Like, if there should be 20 teams out there, at least, calling the Rockets and asking about Cam Whitmore.
Yeah, he's super tantalizing. It does feel like, I don't know how dynamic he stands to be. Like, the passing on offense, and then if the shot isn't falling, his value just becomes all over them. I mean, you can say that about a lot of players, but I don't.
Yeah, Jabari Smith Jr. you can say that about as well, yeah.
No, because Jabari Smith Jr. brings more defensive value than Cam Whitmore.
That is true. I was talking about the passing. All right, yeah.
So, and by the way, Jabari Smith Jr. specifically, I would just like to see him in a better spacing environment, and I think that we would see him.
That's
really
fair.
Top.
I will give you that. It's just I just can't ignore 200 plus games of data and 6,500 minutes. It's like we're getting there.
Right. I don't know if he's going to be an all-star, but I would love to see him. Not that I'm rooting for him to leave, but like if they could get more shooting or someone that could deliver him the ball, like more, like That's just not Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, Reed Shepherd, maybe not yet. I would just love to see him in that type of role, whether it's Houston or elsewhere.
Oh no, don't get me wrong. He would be better in a lot of different situations. I'm not arguing otherwise. I'm just asking what the actual ceiling here is because, like, okay, so with the caveat, and unless he ends up in Denver next to Jokic, where he would blossom as hell, because that's just what happens.
Jamal Murray, is Houston interested in him?
Oh boy!
Oh, no, look, you laugh. He's not a bad fit for this roster.
No, I'm just saying Jamal Murray without Jokic, we've not really seen it.
Oh no, we've seen it in Denver, and it's not pretty for the most part.
Right.
So.
No, but like, it's this. What it boils down to, all of this, is identification. Like, who do we believe moving forward is worth more than whatever we're being offered? Right? Like, look, every single team right now probably has a standing offer for Amen Thompson, and the Rockets are rightfully saying no, thank you. But if that one offer comes in where they estimate his value, the return to be over his value, yeah, pull the trigger. I think that has to be the approach on an individual basis.
That's fair. They need to figure out, like, what does their identity as a team on offense want to look like.
Yeah.
And that's what's so tough here. But it's a good position to be in because they have a lot of assets. They have a lot of intriguing young players, but they're now tasked with kind of the toughest part of this whole progress, which is going from good to great. And my personal belief, to wrap this up, I don't think they get there strictly by banking on internal development. I think we could debate about the level of the player coming in. I think Kobe White is good enough to make a difference as an example. A fringe, like you could throw Anthony Simons on this roster. Maybe you want someone who's a little bit better of a passer, but that's someone else that I think comes in. And am I picking the Rockets to win the title? No, but he gives you more of an even keel presence than Jalen Green, as an example.
Do you trade Reed Shepard straight up for Kobe White?
Ooh. I mean, if I'm the Bulls, I'm pouncing on that, I think, knowing that Kobe White's going to leave. But they're about to pay Josh Giddey, so Reed Shepard's career probably gets ruined in Chicago, unfortunately. Man, I probably can't, just because of the Kobe White contract coming after this. Mm-hmm. If you're talking, could we rewind, and would you trade Reed Shepard straight up at the deadline for Kobe White, then I think you have to consider it. But no, I couldn't. But I also... Would you do it? Because we know that I'm just higher on Reed Shepard, I think, than consensus at this point, frankly.
I mean, look, if you're the Bulls and if you're being, like, honest with yourself about that Kobe White situation, yeah, I'm doing it. Because also Reed Shepard, even though he had a horrible rookie season, there is a level of shot-making capability within his game that I think could make him ultimately worth more than Josh Giddey as well. So, like, just having a superior option down the line so the Bulls can see, oh, perhaps it's time to trade Josh Giddey. That would be smart. I don't think they're smart. So they're not going to do it. What I will say as a secondary option for Chicago is assuming, of course, the Rockets just guarantee Jock Landale's contract just for salary matching purposes, centering a deal around Cam Whitmore and maybe some additional draft compensation. So Cam Whitmore, Jock Landale for salary matching purposes, and some type of pick. I'm not sure, like, how protected, whatever, for Kobe White. I wouldn't hate that for either side either.
No, that's a good one.
Yeah,
I think if it's Whitmore, like sort of a middle end pick, I would say one of the Rockets' own moving forward, rather than
that would be
you're
smart.
Not giving a Suns pick in that. Yeah,
right. That would be.
I like that one. That's a good one. I really like that one. I think that's my Kobe White's like that feels like the middle ground because I've been kind of racking my brain thinking this player's a little pricey, and I wonder if he's too Fred VanVleet when you're looking at if you want someone to create advantages for others. But Emmanuel Quickly would be kind of interesting here too.
Yep, I agree with that.
Our next team is the Memphis Grizzlies. Mort, what's your question for them?
Is it time to trade Ja Morant? The big one, the big question. We have a lot of data now on the Ja Morant Grizzlies. I will say, here's where I'll say it might be a little controversial, hopefully not too controversial. You know, he's improved. I'm not going to sit here and argue that Ja Morant hasn't improved since he came into the league. Having said that, ever since he took was it his third year leap when he was averaging like 27 or something along those lines, like when he became, that guy. Since then, has he actually improved significantly in one single area on the floor to a point where we can point to that and go, oh yeah, we can trust this going forward? I hesitate to say yes. And if he has, please educate me because I'm not seeing it.
That is interesting. I think it's a fair inquiry to make. The problem is, and why I would say no, it's not time to trade Ja Morant.
Mm-hmm.
This feels like it might be the nadir of his value. Maybe you could go back to the off-court
Right.
stuff and say that was the absolute nadir, but having just so much evidence about the limitations of building a half-court offense around him, I don't know how much. Like, what is the? Because Houston, as an example, the team we just talked about, they're not going to go after him. The Magic,
Right.
they're not going to. They need someone who's a bit more reliable shooter. So what is the market? What is the team that's giving you a ton of stuff for Ja Morant? I mean, I kind of thought like would Utah give you like Lowry Markkanen and 2 firsts? And is your team even better after that?
Well, I mean, just because you actually get a sense of positional structure in Utah, I would argue yes. Because, like, who's their point guard, really? Keontae George?
I think Isaiah Collier is probably the better bet at this point. Neither bet's safe.
Yeah, but, like, he's not offensively dynamic either.
Not right now. Right now. He needs to be able
not
to
right
score
now.
outside of the restricted area, for sure.
Exactly. Well, much of the same with Ja, really. I mean, there's not a lot of feel there.
What was his finishing numbers this year? He's like one of those classic guys where it's, why isn't his shooting percentage at the rim higher? It's just he's always there with reckless
69% within 3 feet.
All right, good. That's not Russell.
And he was 71% last year, but that was only a 9-game sample size. So, like,
you know what? It's because he attempts it so much when I'm watching him, and he's always just there. I'm like, oh, why does it feel like he's missing so many? But he gets there. A third of his shots came. By the way, the other thing I think you have to concern yourself with is given the injury history, he is now 6 years deep into his career.
Mm-hmm.
He's only 25, but his game is he's a very high IQ player when you look at the passing, for sure.
Yeah, the passing, absolutely.
But like his game is prided a lot on his athleticism, and you kind of have to wonder, okay, how long is this runway with Ja Morant in his prime at this level? And that's something both the Grizzlies and suitors would, in theory, need to reconcile.
Yeah, I agree.
So
that's why I asked the questions, because I understand not trading him when his value is at the lowest. I buy that argument in its entirety. That said, if you're the Grizzlies, you have to eventually look at this thing and go, like what are we going to do here? Because if you also want to trade Ja, does that have a ripple effect? Like, do you actually want to start over? Like, you're not going to want to pay Jaren Jackson Jr. full max, I assume, if you want to start over again.
No, I probably not. And it's like, yeah, so are you looking to get better as part of the Ja trade? Is there any pathway where that exists? I mean, if the Bucks aren't getting their own picks back at when or if Giannis requests out, building something around Ja Morant for Giannis I don't know if that's what Memphis needs, but if you just say we're going to figure it out when it comes to the
right.
offensive floor generalship, having Jaren Jackson Jr. and Giannis on the same team is insane.
That would be
fun. And if you're the Bucks, you could say, all right, we still have Dame, so there's that tricky part of it. But if you're looking for kind of a tentpole young player to map out your future, Ja Morant would be an interesting option.
Yeah. I will say Jaren Jackson Jr. and Giannis would be fun in the regular season. In the playoffs, no. Well, I mean, look, we have to talk about it as well. I mean, Jaren Jackson Jr. in the playoffs historically has been, what's the kind word to say, ass?
But?
Yeah, but he's been butt. No, look, that's harsh. He's been disappointing, okay? Like, I was just trying to crack a joke there. He's been disappointing in the playoffs, and that's been through the 4 times he's been there. Even when he's hitting shots, then he's not rebounding. Even when he's rebounding, then he's not hitting shots. It's like you can't get the full Jaren Jackson Jr. package in the playoffs for whatever reason, apparently. And I think he's shown that to an extent now where I'm like, no, his value in my eyes, that's just me personally, is significantly below what, consensus. Because I think if you trade for Jaren Jackson Jr., it's with the mindset of, hey, let's make a playoff run, or not a title run. Let's get deep into the playoffs. Well, if you go into the playoffs and you're aiming to make the finals, you probably need to have guys who perform in the postseason, and he does not.
Which leads me to my question. What happens if Jaren Jackson Jr. doesn't renegotiate and extend? Maybe he doesn't
Nothing
agree
bad.
to it. And so
Nothing bad happens. Even if they pivot off of him, nothing bad happens.
wow. So they probably got, it might have been a blessing in disguise that he didn't make All-NBA for the Grizzlies, which kind of sucks that we view it through that lens. He would have been eligible for that Supermax of 5 years, $345.3 million. They could have, I don't think they would have given him that, but maybe they would have felt pressure to, or maybe even just giving him the 30% max.
Right.
You have to ask yourself, is he worth this? What they can do now is they project to have about $7 million in cap space while keeping Santi Aldama. If you bump up Jaren Jackson, this is how renegotiate and extend works for maybe anyone who's not familiar with it, and hopefully I'm not, too wordy or confusing anyone here. The Grizzlies have $7 million in cap space. They can give that to Jaren Jackson Jr., bump him up to about $30.4 million, which would allow them to offer him a 4-year, $190.8 million extension from there. So over the next 5 years, including next season, he's on the books for $44.2 million on average, rather than over the next 6 years, had he been Supermax eligible, averaging about $61.5 million. That's a huge difference when you're factoring in on the margins, keeping this team together.
Yeah.
My question though is, what if he sits there and says, no, I'm not going to take the renegotiate and extend, and if I go into free agency, I'm going to get
Good luck,
a
buddy.
30% max.
Good
there.
luck, buddy. Look, here's the thing. He's a great regular season player. I'm not gonna sit here and say he's like a bad player whatsoever. My entire frustration comes down to the fact that he's 6'11". He's built really, really well, and he's one of the most athletic interior players in the league. And all he can muster is about 5 boards per game. 1, that is weak as shit. 2, he does not show up for the playoffs. Those are highly concerning elements to me. But if you're a team that just wants to get into the playoffs, he's a major get. Like, if you're a team out there that's just like, in the play-in bubble every single year, getting a guy in who just averaged 22 points in just over 29 minutes, major elements like to your success in order to get in. Like, because the productivity in the regular season is nuts. But if you're paying him 35% of the cap, it's with the assumption that he's going to lead you to places in the playoffs, which he will not. So I'm just not worried about it.
That's interesting, because I'd be a little bit if he turns it down, because I guess the margin's not too different. Is 4 years and 190 versus his max from another team next summer would be, I think it's 4 years and about 219 million. So we're not actually talking about that big of a difference. It could be higher if it's the Grizzlies. They have the 5th year. They can give 8% raises. But if he says no when you're the Grizzlies, you're playing this out and saying, we'll let it ride to unrestricted free agency. You're not looking at, no, I'm trading.
If he says no, I'm trading.
You said nothing happens. That's what
No. When I said nothing happens, what I mean is there are no long-term consequences of trading Jaren Jackson Jr. if you're the Memphis Grizzlies. That's what I'm saying.
You've had some pretty bold-ass takes, and that is spicy. That there's just no difference for Memphis.
No. Well, I mean, look, you're obviously, because again, it's the ripple effect. We just talked about Ja, right? Like, if you trade Ja, the overwhelming assumption is Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to be your best player. That's going to lead you nowhere. Like, he's not your best player. If he's the best player on a team and that's the lens you're looking at him through, you're fucked pretty much. And that's my take. When I say nothing changes, obviously they're going to lose more games in the regular season, obviously. But in terms of like their overall championship equity, it's not going to make a damn difference, because so far, what has their championship equity looked like?
Okay, fair. So who would you rather here's an interesting question then. Who would you rather have on your team? Well, actually, let me start here. So you don't think if he hits 26 free agency, you don't think there's going to be a max offer waiting for him? Oh,
no, I'm not saying there isn't. I think there shouldn't be, but like, teams are crazy. Like, I will say there is one team specifically where I would open the door to him being like the best version of himself. That's next to Luka in Los Angeles. Like, if he gets next to Luka, just the sheer amount of shots that he'll be spoon-fed, yes, that is the one area where I could see him make that transition from regular season player to playoff performer. That would be the one. Outside of that, I really struggle to see a scenario where he lands on a team and says, oh, yeah, now I'm something good in the playoffs when it matters. So might there be an offer out there, a max offer? Sure, because NBA teams do this stuff all the time. Do I think there should be based on what he's giving you in the playoffs right now? No, I don't think there should be.
Wow. I'm going to be watching the renegotiate and extension talks now that it's not, because he's not going to sign the extension. I mean, if he signs the extension off his current number, that's probably a win for the Grizzlies, where you don't even have to
sure. Oh, yeah. No, like, okay, look, I come off as a huge Jaren Jackson Jr. hater here. That's not my intent. My point is basically, I'm not interested as an NBA organization in paying him. You know, I think what was the 300? No, he's not eligible for the Supermax, but people were like, oh, let's hope he gets the Supermax so he can sign the deal. Like, 345 million, I think, averaged out to what is 69 million per year. And that's ridiculous money. That is utterly ridiculous money for a guy who doesn't perform in the postseason. Like, if you can get him for 40 per year straight, yeah, absolutely. Because look, that's worth getting into the playoffs. And that's what he will do for you. He will get your ass into the playoffs if he's like the secondary, tertiary guy on the team. Absolutely, he will. Or well, he would at least aid that goal significantly. So, yeah, I'm paying him $40 million a year. What, 60? 65?
He's not a 35% max guy. I'm curious. Maybe not to the Grizzlies. I could see him being worth 30% because his defensive value. I know the rebounding's an issue, but it's kind of insane.
No, yeah, for sure. And again, I came off way too harsh on this one. I can tell. It's just we're constantly talking about championship windows, right? That has become the big conversation. Is NBA teams now have shorter championship windows, shorter competitive windows. That also means that whenever you have a chance to make a run, you better make damn sure that the players that you are paying the most money to are major assets who outperform their actual contractual compensation level in the postseason. So far, Jaren Jackson Jr. has not done that. And if you give him a significant raise, you're putting yourself into possibly a world of hurt.
Let's move on to our next team in this division, the New Orleans Pelicans. Little confusing. What's your question, Mort?
Is this the end of the road for Zion Williamson? Like, we have to ask the question.
It's not. You want to know why? He was on the day at the NBA lottery. You don't send someone to be your lottery representative and then move him, right?
I mean, you would hope not. That'd be
really funny.
That'd be funny. Could you imagine if they won the lottery and got Cooper Flag and then immediately were like, oh, hey, thanks for getting us Coop.
That is kind of weird because you're sending him there in theory at that point where this could be for them to win the right to draft your replacement.
Yeah. And they already have Trey Murphy, who is, like, let's be real, could probably play that role as well. Oh God, this team is just so confusing. That's why I'm asking the question about Zion, because like he's obviously the guy who could fetch you a certain level of return, because like the contractual stuff, like whoever team would trade for him has a lot of control over the contract. There's MVP upside in attaining him. So like presumably there'll be value attached to get back. Like, is there a lot of value in trading out CJ McCollum? No. Is there value in trading away Dejounte Murray, who's was it the ACL or Achilles? I don't even remember. Achilles. Oh God. So an ACL tear earlier in his career, and now the Achilles. That's rough. There's not going to be value in moving him right now either. Like, what are they doing here? That's harsh to put that on at their feet entirely, because injuries are a thing. I just don't know what their plan of attack here is.
What I'm wondering, though, is does it get worse if you move Zion right now? Because what's the best offer you could get for him? I proposed, and this for some reason it felt, the basis of this deal was DeAndre Ayton and then 2 of the Milwaukee Bucks swaps now all of a sudden New Orleans controls 4 of Milwaukee's draft picks, I think. Is that enough? Is that too much if you're the Blazers? I guess my point would be, couldn't it get hazier? Just because look at where they're drafting this year in the lottery. They're coming in at number 7. I
Yeah.
don't know how you feel about this draft yet. Like, they're probably not going to find this fortunes turning player. Zion, to me, is still their best chance of doing that. And so I look at it as, by the way, I think your question is spot on. Like, it's very fundamental, but it's like, it has to be, this is an existential crisis, essentially, that it feels like
Yeah.
this organization's been caught in for years. I think what you do, my plan would be, we're keeping Zion. Can he either, one, just play so well that it's clear that he is our pole star of the future, or can he increase his trade value leading into the trade deadline? Because I don't even, honestly, if you went to Portland and offered that as New Orleans, I don't know if they do it. And I would do it. I want to make it clear.
Right.
I don't think, if I'm the Pelicans, I probably don't want to take that offer. But at the same time, it's like, I also, by the way, number 11 was also included in there.
Okay.
So it was number 11, those 2 Buck swaps. I'm just like, does that materially change your fortunes? Because Zion's money is, you could talk about, well, there's the contract. 1, it has outs for New Orleans. And 2,
yeah.
like, if Zion's not Zion, you're cooked anyway. Like, to me, the money, he's not on a max where it's just like breaking your organization. Like,
No. He's on the fun max. Yeah.
He's on the fun max, and also just if he's not right, it doesn't fucking matter. You could be paying him the minimum. Your team is still going nowhere.
Yeah.
So that would be my plan of attack. But this leads into my question. If they keep Zion, well, actually, let's get your answer. What do you want them to do, or what do you think they will do? What do you think they should do when on the Zion front?
No, I would look to trade him. I'm not saying I would trade him. Like, I would collect offers. I would see what's out there. I will not decide to just negotiate with one team, because that's dumb. Who does that? I would open it up and see what's out there. And if one team just made a big brain fart and was like, yes, we're all in, we're giving up everything, I'm taking that thing and I'm running away with it.
What is the team? Like, what is the team that you look at and say,
dude,
they can talk themselves?
You never know. Like, sometimes.
But I'm asking you. So pull
yeah,
one
like,
out of that. Yeah.
Okay. Now you're going to laugh again because I already brought them up. Like, call the Bulls. Call the Bulls.
Your solution is just everyone pillage the Bulls.
Right. Am I wrong, though? Like, call. No, I'm not just saying the Bulls as well. Like, just call up the teams that you as an organization consider the weakest negotiators. Like, call up the teams that you consider desperate. Call up the teams that you have identified as being at a crossroads where they have no freaking idea what to do, and where you might be able to squeeze them for more than they probably feel comfortable doing. Call those up. Be progressive. Be proactive. Do something. Like, I don't have any problem with Zion returning, but given the current construct of the team, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Like, Trey Murphy and Herb Jones, great players. I love both of them. Do I love them both together alongside Zion? Probably not. Like, things have to change dramatically. So, like, look, if we're talking about trade value, I wouldn't like trading Trey Murphy, but he's on a contract that's very reasonable, assuming he's healthy. You could probably get a ton of that. Why not try to finagle something out of this?
Man, I haven't even tried to think. I just assumed he would not be moved. I have not given any thought to the Trey Murphy trade.
I'm working under the same assumption. I'm just talking out loud.
Portland might give up more for him than Zion at this point.
Man, Denny and Trey Murphy would be interesting together.
I mean, Trey Murphy just opening up the floor for literally any team.
Everything. Yeah. Yeah.
What'd you do?
Mm-hmm.
What pick number do they have? So it's Julius Randle, if he opts in,
okay.
Rob Dillingham, and then number 18 for Zion. Does they have 18? No, number 17 for Zion. They got that from Detroit.
Yeah. Yes. And that's, that would hurt because I love seeing Julius Randle actually playing well in the postseason. I love how he's actually turned his own narrative around. I was harsh for a lot of years on Julius Randle, and I don't think I was wrong in doing so, in being so, rather. Now I'm really enjoying to see his resurgence, or whatever you want to call it, realization of how to play proper basketball. So to him to get moved back to a place he's actually been before as well, that's rough. But if I'm the Wolves, and I get a chance to pair Anthony Edwards and Zion Williamson, even though like there's still the injury risk and the availability issue of Zion, that upside is just too good to pass up.
That's like not a package New Orleans can accept, right? It's Dillingham and a first-round pick, essentially.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right. That's why they should explore. That's why they shouldn't just be like, okay, we're accepting offers. Like, they should follow up on some of their offers and go, yeah, you can do better. Come on, hit us back next week with something better. Like, yeah.
My question for the team, which I think is going to become at least more relevant for this offseason, maybe I'm wrong. I would love to see, look, there are teams I'd love to see. Zion in Detroit. Can you imagine that? Him and Cade together?
Yeah, that'd be fun.
That'd be incredible. What do they need the most if they're planning to keep building around Zion? And I present this with the caveat that DeJounte Murray may not play this season or for most of this season, but he's still on your team.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is a floor leader. So that's where it hurts, right? Because he's still on the books. We don't know what kind of, what's the word here? We don't know what kind of state he's going to be when he returns. CJ is obviously too old. He can play a sort of pseudo point guard role for the time being, but that's not good enough. They need a player who can hit reliable outside shots, who can be that secondary guy. Like, they need a Tyrese Halliburton. That's the type of player they need, but like
supercharged, modern, contemporary Steve Nash. Yeah, that's not a hard player to find.
No, exactly. But that's the type of player you need to pair with such a specific talent as Zion.
What about, I mean, his name is going to come up a bunch because I think he's really good, and also his contract almost necessitates.
If you say Reed Shepherd again, so help me God. Yeah.
I would trade for Reed Shepherd if I'm the Pelicans. I'll give up everything for Reed Shepherd. I'll risk it all. I was going to say, his name's just going to come up.
All right.
Kobe White for the Pelicans.
Yeah, Kobe White should come up a lot this year. He'd make a lot of sense there. Like, he's still more of a combo in my eyes than he is.
Which works long term with DeJounte, right? Or no?
Again, depending on how DeJounte returns, I don't know.
Well, I think at that point, you have Zion and Kobe White to alleviate some of the responsibilities offensively. Now, defensively, you could have some issues if those three are on the court together and DeJounte Murray's not the same player. But that's why you have Herb and Trey Murphy and Yves Missi. I think you can also argue that I like Missi, but like, do they need a different type of a big man look alongside Zion? We've talked a lot about that over the years. It'd be something I'd investigate. I don't view it as go out and get Kristaps Porzingis or sign and trade for Miles Turner or Naz Reid right now. But
as I said, I spent a lot of time saying this at the pre-draft last year, and I've been saying it like all throughout the entire year. Khalil Ware was the guy they should have targeted aggressively in the draft last year. Like, he was drafted before they had
shooting.
I trusted more than I trust Yves Missi.
Yeah, but Yves Missi
he's a vertical player.
It's like that's Khalil Ware's primary value right now.
Right. Primary. See, that's the thing. Yes, primary, but he can at least stretch the floor at a level where Missi is like what, years away from doing.
If at all, but Yves Missi also plays defense at a level that we've yet to see from Khalil Ware.
Right. That very fair, but I would rather go with the high upside swing there.
I don't know. I wonder what it would take to get you. Who'd be really interesting on this team next to Zion because we did see him shooting threes? Zach Edey.
Oh, yeah, like the big lumbering guy who can also grab lobs, but who can, if he upped his volume a little bit, he would clock the paint a ton, though. Yeah.
Honestly, this player's like similar, way older. He's a free agent, and New Orleans could access the non-taxpayer with Brook Lopez.
Well, yeah, I knew you were going there. That'd be fun. That's the archetype. If he only wasn't 2.3 million years old, yeah.
Well, even now for I don't know what is. He might want to be on a better team. He might want to go back.
Oh yeah, it's because I'm thinking long term. I'm thinking long term. I want someone next to Zion for not just 1 year, but a couple years at least.
Yeah, Herb Jones doesn't do enough. It's a good option. In my head, I was wondering, like, the Grizzlies, they still kind of need their wing of the future, but Jalen Wells and Zach Edey for Herb Jones just feels rich because Herb Jones doesn't do the thing that they need the most. So, like, Herb Jones is excellent, but he doesn't do the thing that Memphis needs.
He's also not that available, Herb.
Also fair. The other thing, too, I would love to see them sign Chris Boucher. That's someone who could run alongside Zion
Oh,
Williamson.
that'd be fun. Yeah.
But yeah, long term, the higher end, I think Messi with the vertical gravity and the stuff he could do defensively. I thought those two played well off each other, by the way, him and Zion, Messi and Zion by the end of the year. But I'm with you that they kind of need a floor general, but just don't know how do you wait investing in one when you know you have DeJounte Murray and you also know that you don't know what he's going to look like.
Mhm.
How's that for some verbiage there?
Yep.
Any other names that throw out there? Any other things on this team?
No, I'm just a little skeptical of them as currently constructed and with the assets that they have in hand. I'm going to be interested to see what they do this summer because nothing right now screams obviousness to me, and that's often a red flag.
Our next team and final team of the Southwest Division, you might have heard of them. They are the San Antonio Spurs, who almost had Cooper Flag. That was, man, watching the lottery. I know we're weeks removed from it now, but I was really like, the Spurs are going to get Flag. This is absolutely.
I was
happening
rooting
to
for
them.
it. I was rooting for it. That would have been the best thing ever. I would have loved it because imagine the defense. So like I know you're a sucker for defenders and for good overarching defense. Just imagine like Wemby, Flag, and a De'Aaron Fox who now doesn't have to assert all that offensive energy that he did in Sacramento, so he could actually get back to some of his like defensively oriented game, and then Stephon Castle. Castle throwing for good measure. Yeah, absolutely. Defensively, with that, probably ranked number 2 in the league behind OKC. Like right off the bat, that wouldn't shock me.
So what is your question for the Spurs?
My question is, what's the big play? Like what?
I added
Assuming
a
they
follow-up
make
one for you.
Yeah, will they even make one? Yeah.
I'm skeptical. I just don't. That would be so. I know they traded for De'Aaron Fox, but that was this player only wants to come here. The cost was reasonable enough.
Very
They've been
reasonable.
The team. I think you were an advocate of it too. But Grant really wants them to trade for Giannis. He wants them to be the Giannis team.
Me too. And that is the play that I've outlined several times. The thing here is, Dylan Harper is really, really good.
And he can shoot, which is
Well,
he needs that.
I mean, 33% from downtown at the collegiate level.
He was on 40+% on spot ups, I believe.
37.
37. Right.
Yeah, at least according to Ricky O'Donnell, who was on my pod.
I would trust him over me.
I would trust Ricky over virtually everyone when it comes to draft stuff. He's got a memory that's insane. So like the shooting needs work, but Harper to me could be, one of those point guards. So, the big physical point guards who has this, how to phrase this. So, how there are guys who aren't necessarily major like physical athletes, but they think the game out. And because they think the game out, they tend to reach their potential a little bit more. I'm talking about Luka. I'm talking about Paul Pierce. I'm talking about those type of guys. James Harden too. Well, Harden is athletic, but like he never utilized it to the extent he probably could. Like thinkers. Dylan Harper is a thinker. That to me is enormously attractive right off the bat because who is another thinker on that team who's also coincidentally their franchise superstar? You want
Julian
to add
Champagny.
Exactly. That is, you hit it right on the money. He should stick around, by the way. He's really good. You're basically telling Wemby, look, we're going to bring in a thinker for you because you and him are going to solve issues together on the fly and you're going to be really good at it. Like there's a part of me that also just want to say, you know what? Screw it. Just stick with Dylan Harper and then let's see what happens. Like let's just build a long-term window. But like if Giannis comes up, he's probably like the one guy out there who might be pseudo available where you just go, screw it. Like let's get nuts.
Is there another name out there though? Because when you say what's the big play, is there another player that then moves the needle? Because we're not asking should you go trade for Giannis. Let's say if they opt not for Giannis, is what do you want to see them? Is Giannis Is that what you want? I mean, it's another, I guess, a front court upgrade, like alongside
Mhm.
Wemby at this point. Uh, but is there another player that moves you there?
There is one guy that I wanted on the Spurs for a while. He's just not available. That's Cade Cunningham. That's
Yeah, I mean,
that's
right. I mean, more so
you're
like
asking.
should they
Yeah.
be a Kevin Durant team? Like someone who
No,
costs
no,
less than Giannis? No.
no.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I get why you're confused because look, this the spacing element of it. He's such a better shooter than Giannis. It's if you relinquish a ton for a guy who's that old. That's again. I've said this a million times. That's what I keep coming back to with the Kevin Durant thing. Is if you relinquish a lot for a guy who's like for what 2 years away from retirement, I just don't know if that's worth the squeeze. Like, yeah, you can get like you would have to win the title. Like you would almost have to guarantee yourself a title. And I'm just not there where I think KD is at that level where you can pencil him in like he could when you got him to Golden State, for example. So like Giannis is also probably the oldest player that I'm honestly interested in because I know timelines are a little bit overrated now that competitive windows are so short.
Mhm.
But with Wemby specifically, I have to think long term. I have to.
And what about any of the Celtics guys if they became available, like a reunion with Derek White or even Jalen Brown?
Brown would be interesting, but I'm worried about the contract, and I'm like, he did not look great this year. He really didn't. Like, if he has a bounce back year and he returns to like the version he was 2 years ago,
You definitely want to see like what his knee is looking like because he was battling through that the entire season or
yeah.
most of it. It seems like.
So based on that, right now, no. I mean, again, I would need some level of insurances. Who's available? That you have to
I was
start with
honestly
that,
thinking
right?
like a middle ground type.
Yeah.
This doesn't cost you anything, and I actually think that he would make their team a lot more dynamic. They're a good Cam Johnson team.
Yeah, that's a good floor spacing element. Absolutely. I think even on its own, you also have to wonder, like, what is the plan with Jeremy Sohan right now? Because I probably would prefer
Extension eligible Jeremy Sohan. That happened fast, right?
Yeah, it did. Because right now, even though I think Sohan projects as the better all-around player moving forward, Cam Johnson just solves such a big need that they have right off the bat. Where if he were to make that roster, like traded onto that roster, I could not sit here and say that Jeremy Sohan should be playing over him. That would be a very hard sell. So, like, yes, they need to bridge the gap between talent and fit. And that's always like a tough situation to get into. Before they made it this far in the lottery, and before they also traded for De'Aaron Fox, I was big on them going after, guess who? Kobe White. That was one of those guys who I was looking for. Not at the cards anymore.
What about? Oh, we just talked about him previously. If maybe he says no to the extension, Jaren Jackson Jr.
Defensively, yeah, ridiculous upside. But again, like these Spurs have championship aspirations in the near future because of the presence of Wemby. Do I trust a guy who's historically been very poor in the playoffs? Maybe under the right circumstances. Are these the right circumstances? I don't know. He would definitely give them floor spacing as well, which they sorely need. So, like, I'm not saying he doesn't solve two needs, honestly, but will that carry over into the postseason is what I kind of need to know a little bit.
What if Denver's just in the business of cutting costs at this point? And so the Spurs have those Harrison Barnes and Keldon Johnson expiring contracts. You could send one to the Nets or maybe another team as a large enough trade exception, and those are players that are useful. Do you take a flyer? Because this would cost you, I would think, minimal in just terms of assets and equity. Would you take a flyer on Michael Porter Jr.?
So skills-wise, I would probably take a flyer on him. Here's my bigger issue. Does he fit into that locker room from a personality perspective? I think a guy like him, where the
Imagine him and Pop having political. Obviously, Pop's not the coach anymore, but he is the popo.
Right. You know, the political debates. Look, that might be a place where MPJ can go to be rehabilitated. So that's a good thing.
Radicalized in the scientific way, yeah.
Right. That said, I think he's got tendencies that would frustrate the everlasting fuck out of Vic. That I do think. I think because if you notice one thing, it's that while Wemby is an extraordinary teammate, he also demands a ton out of his guys. MPJ has become a little bit of a poster boy in terms of a guy who probably could do more than what he does and just doesn't do it and is too inconsistent and just occasionally just runs around and does nothing. I think that would be an issue, especially at that price point. I mean, hell, you could I'd probably take Cam Johnson over MPJ in that specific circumstance, and fairly easily so. And that's paying like what, half the salary? Well, not half, but close to it.
It's close. I mean, like, and Cam Johnson's declining. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't like Larry Markkinen for this team anymore with his price point. I did find him interesting, but him and Vic together would be
fun.
Madness.
Yeah.
What about? I mean, you just mentioned should this team investigate his trade value? Trey Murphy in San Antonio.
Yes, Trey Murphy is a big one who I think could be a major key moving forward. So he's sort of in that same salary bracket as Devin Vassell, and I think Vassell was a little overwhelmed this year. He's had better season. He was not good this year, but I do think there's a better shooter in him than what we saw. Is that better floor spacing if you actually retain Vassell and you get? I don't know who you send out. That's the big question, right? Like it probably has to be Kelton Johnson and stuff, and then what the fuck is
Barnes
stuff
as well. Like, yeah, and
Yeah.
it would be. I mean, if New Orleans is trading Trey Murphy, I think that they're in the picks and prospects business
right,
at that point.
exactly. So that's probably a landing spot for Jeremy Sohan as well. But like, so let's assume it's what De'Aaron Fox, Devin Vassell,
Trey
I
Murphy.
guess Trey Murphy at the 3 or the 4. That I don't even care. And yeah, 4 maybe because then you have Julian Champagny at the 3 for spacing purposes. That suddenly becomes interesting. Now you have Wemby and Fox with maybe not optimized, but really good spacing around them. And Wemby himself is a floor spacer.
This is. I'm just throwing stuff. What's that? You made fun of me. You called it the Fox newsification of Dan. I'm just asking questions, Mort. The number 2 pick for Trey Murphy and the number 7 pick. Who says no?
That's a really good one.
You could send Sohan to New Orleans as well. And I mean, there'd have to be other money involved, but.
So, look, I am especially high on Dylan Harper, probably more so than consensus. So I'm inclined to say no, but I fully concede that's a conversation. Like that is not something you hang up the phone for. That is where you sit down and you probably actually take a meeting face to face and you hash it out and figure out a way that makes sense. That's a really good starting point.
Any other names that we should? Oh, you know who I would love? And again, maybe I shouldn't put it past this franchise. I have no idea what they're doing, and we'll eventually talk about them. I might even like this player's fit more than.
Oh my God, you're going to say
Trey Murphy
LaMelo Ball. You're going to say LaMelo Ball, aren't you?
No. I like LaMelo Ball everywhere, though. We know that. I was going to say I might like him better than Trey Murphy, but Trey Murphy's got some more that we've seen on-ball juice. Keegan Murray.
Yeah, I've had that thought a lot. So here's my issue. Keegan, as much as I love the rebounding improvements and the defensive improvements, I need to see more out of him offensively speaking. He was built to this guy who'd come in and average 20. That's an arbitrary number, but like be a high volume offensive scorer, not someone who could just shoot, but do more with the ball in his hands. He goes through these major, I don't want to say slumps, but he goes through like periods where his confidence just drops, and you can often tie together just with him not making shots. That to me is a pretty big red flag now, where I'm worried about that moving forward.
I'm not as worried. I think that the ecosystem in Sacramento has been, 1, overturned too often, and 2, was never conducive to like putting him in. Just look at how many different ball handlers they brought in, and then they kind of there's a roster churn there this past season. But I think that's fair. Like there's been some inconsistency even, and he's been asked to play, to be fair, a pretty streamlined role. And the fact that you're coming out of it wondering why isn't he more of even a dead-eye shooter, or why isn't he even more consistent, I think that's totally fair.
I do have a name for you though.
One that Karl-Anthony Towns.
It's not. It's someone who's basically breaking out, but he hasn't broken out to an extent where
Reed
he's
Shepherd.
like where he's like untouchable. Denny Avdiva.
I don't like
Not
it.
not giving up the second overall pick, obviously.
No,
but
I know.
like,
I know
oh,
he
really?
shot the ball well this year, and there's a lot of IQ there then, but like
Yeah.
you need to surround Vic with more dead eye shooting, and that's just I don't that doesn't necessarily bring you further away from doing that, but I feel like it's more so you might actually lose floor spacing as part of that trade if Harrison Barnes is part of the outgoing money. Denny Avdi is a better player, better on the ball, but if you're going to have Fox, because you're not trading Castle or the number 2 pick in this scenario either, which might be part of the appeal, but
Right.
God damn, just put some more shooting around Victor Wembanyama,
I
please.
I hear that. I totally do. I was thinking him in the short roll with Wemby, like in the dunker spot, would be, whew, that'd be fun.
I wouldn't be opposed to it. That's just I don't know if I don't know how much asset allocation for San Antonio. If De'Aaron Fox wasn't there already, I might feel differently. Or if one of these things didn't happen, that they had Steph Castle,
Right.
the number 2 pick, and De'Aaron Fox, which by the way, that is my question.
Yep.
I don't know why I have it written as I do on screen, but if they keep the number 2 pick, can Dylan Harper, De'Aaron Fox, and Steph Castle all coexist in the same rotation?
So here's a take I have. I think Stephon Castle right now is, we've all talked about him as, the point guard of the future before they traded for De'Aaron Fox. I don't think he's necessarily a point guard. I don't think he's necessarily a 2 guard. I don't think he's exclusively a wing. I think he's one of those very positionless players. Not going to say Jalen Williams, because Jalen has a shooting touch that Castle obviously does not have, but the positional fluidity and the ability to also defend up positions, I think those are real. So like, if you get a very good shooter in at one of the guard spots, for example, and you have De'Aaron Fox at the 1, could you survive with Stephon Castle at the 3 as long as you also make sure that the 4-man is a floor spacer? I'm not saying I love it, but I think there's some upside there. At the very least, Stephon Castle has so much positional fluidity that you can sort of like put him into the right situations at will.
I could see him being offensively more of a supercharged Bruce Brown type. You can have him set screens, make some plays out of the short
Right.
roll himself, especially within that ecosystem. What I would be worried about is that having Fox, Harper, and Castle, it feels like it would inhibit any one of them, including Fox, who's more of an established player, just from hitting their peak or the best version of themselves in the Spurs. There just feels like there's too much redundancy in both strengths and weaknesses, for that matter.
I don't think you're wrong. I think it's a real question. That's why I'm like thinking out of the box and basically trying to turn Castle into, not necessarily a guard, because I do think he can play off ball, not necessarily as a spacer, but in terms of his cutting, the way he just moves around, like he doesn't stand still all the time. I think there's something there.
Mm-hmm.
But like, you're right. The spacing concerns are real. Like, this is why I didn't like when the initial rumors came out about De'Aaron Fox and San Antonio. A lot of people were like, "Oh, this is a great fit." Like, they jumped on the train immediately. I was a little bit more skeptical. I'm still not like in fully love with the fit. I think what they got him for was tremendous. That was tremendous work from the Spurs. But I'm not married to the Wemby De'Aaron Fox pairing long term. So if suddenly something pops up, I know that would be very hard for Fox, who actively wanted to be there. But if something came up where they could optimize their floor spacing capabilities and streamline that roster a little bit more, and that would cost them Fox, I'm not saying no.
Man, he forces his way to San Antonio, and then they flip him. That would be
No, and I don't think, because it doesn't seem like that's an organization that they want to be. But like, I don't think they realize they're going to win the second freaking pick in the draft either. So now they're looking at a situation where, okay, things suddenly changed. Like, again, to reiterate myself, I'm a big Dylan Harper guy. Really, I am. I think there's a lot of upside in him and Wemby moving forward. So if Fox becomes a sacrificial lamb there, but you also feel a need in moving him, I don't hate that. I don't. But you don't have to move him now. I don't think you're in any rush. You can still have a good season where he just plays balls out, and then maybe you look at it at the trade deadline or whatever. Like, he's an unrestricted free agent in 2026, so that complicates matters slightly. But yeah, I'm not married to that fit at all.
This isn't number 2 pick material. Should they be a Nas Reed team? Like, it's some sort of sign and trade. I don't think he's going to take the non-taxpayer mid-level. Is that or no? Does he not give you enough of the? He has a real floor game, but does it not feel like him and Wemby are kind of girthy enough? Let's say on the front line.
Let's just put it that way. If we're looking for a guy who's going to play a lot of power forward and who needs to shoot the ball, I'm looking at Trey Murphy instead, as opposed to Nas Reed.
Well, I think the difference there is, 1, is Trey Murphy available, and 2, how much is it costing you to get him?
Right. And I'm not in a... Okay, let me put it this way. I'm going to rephrase it. I'm not in a rush to go find like a 4 or 5 man. I am way more in a rush to go find a legit wing. And if I didn't have spacing issues, by the way, Dan, if I didn't have spacing issues as an organization right now, I'm calling up Houston and I'm saying, number 2 for Amin Thompson, what do you think? Can we build a package off of that?
I think they would immediately say no.
Correct. And that's why you add the 27 Hawks pick unprotected as well.
I think they still say no.
Probably. But like at the very least, you make that call. Again, if you had spacing around them. That is the number 1 need with a bullet. That is spacing. But it shouldn't be for every cost. You know what I mean? Like this team still needs to optimize the talent level to get in.
Do you think they end up doing something that's considered splashy? I'm talking not like Nas Reed would be interesting, but not at that level. Something higher. I think
they've already had their splash. I think De'Aaron Fox was their splash.
Well, you said, will they make a big play? That was your question. So I'm asking.
Yeah. No, so that's the thing. I would be. My question to that is, or sorry, my answer to that is, I'm inclined to say no when it comes to like a major shakeup. Like, if it comes out that Giannis does actively ask out, that changes the equation.
Yep. I think I would have been more on board with the idea of, the Spurs will do this if we had seen more reps of De'Aaron Fox and Wemby together, and we didn't. Yep. So, and that's just like sort of a big thing looming over all this, is how do you make such a wholesale call without having a concrete idea of what's already in place? And so I think that they would, I'll frame it this way. I think they would max out at like, we traded for Cam Johnson, we traded for Nas Reed, signed and traded for Nas Reed or something. That feels like maybe Trey Murphy would be like the absolute apex of, well, that dude's just going to fix it, like fit anywhere and make so much sense. But in terms of like a ton of consolidation, or not even a ton, but like moving the number 2 pick, I guess, for a player that would cost you, Steph Castle or the number 2 pick, I would be pretty shocked if the Spurs end up doing anything like that.
So I do have one for you here. And it was a question I got probably a month or so ago that I just completely forgot about. And I was reminded of it recently. I don't think he played ever since getting traded to Toronto. Brandon Ingram didn't play for him, right? Did he play a game? No, I don't think so. So they're overloaded at the wing spot. This is something we've talked about. They have Brandon, they have RJ, obviously they have Scotty Barnes. Now the Spurs are in that situation where they have too many guards, right? And it feels like there's something there. A deal centered around De'Aaron Fox for Brandon Ingram and stuff, could that do something? Is that interesting for both parties? Is there something there?
I don't know, honestly. I think Toronto then has Quickly and Fox and Barnes. That's interesting. But that's a lot of, Barnes and Fox and I'd be more intrigued by that setup in Toronto if you're going to play Fox and Quickly together, that being the caveat, than I am with Brandon Ingram there. That I would say. Yeah, I don't know if I like that for the Spurs, though.
See, that's the thing, right? Like, if there's a system where Brandon Ingram might actually realize or get taught, hey, play to your strengths, take more threes. Maybe that's the place, right? Like maybe him coming to a situation where there's a very clear-cut superstar in place and he's way more available than the superstar you played with before. Maybe there's a sense of, okay, you know what? If the superstar needs me to space the floor for him, shit, I better do so.
I mean, that is a thing. That's one that I would need to think about even after it went down. I'd probably need to see it to understand it or believe it.
But we can agree that it's a wing that would dramatically improve upon their current wing depth, right?
Yeah, I mean, their best wing is like, do you even like Barnes and Johnson are both kind of not wings. Champagne's their best wing. Like Devin Vassell feels a little small, but maybe the answer is just him.
Too. Yeah. I like Champagne though. I know that he was a little up and down this season, but like considering that he was like an end of the bench guy, I also spoke with people within the organization who just raves about him. Like he's so good, and the thing I keep hearing is just he doesn't seem to fully understand how good he is, which is always interesting. Like because if he has that realization at some point, like he's like a legit 6'8". I've stood next to him a couple times. Like this isn't 6'8" in size, but like 6'5" in reality, and he can play both the 2 and the 3, and he can get that shot off so damn quickly. Like if there's another layer to him coming next year, maybe some of those wing issues solve themselves.
The other player that we didn't really kind of mention in this sort of if they have Fox, Harper, and Castles, does Devin Vassell get lost in the shuffle of all this? It's a good problem to have, but I don't love it. And I think you have to try it to see. Like I said, I don't expect them to move any of those guys that we just outlined, but it is a real question because none of those dudes are wings.
Right. How much of this whole conversation changes, by the way, if Stephon Castle comes back next year and is like a 40% three-point shooter? Like, does that changes like everything? The ripple effect of Stephon Castle developing into a legit three-point shooter just basically changes everything.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be pretty close, and then you're all of a sudden, but then still, it's like the Harper and the Fox of it all.
No, but all right, but like then you're getting into like the minor issues because the overarching issue here is that you're kind of stuck with the Castle lineups because he's such a putrid shooter as he is right now. If that changes like that, we're looking at a completely different like way of analyzing the team.
Doesn't that feel like such a big leap though? When do we ever see these players that we think are like really erratic or bad shooters just all of a sudden become league average or better shooters that one, operate at a higher volume, and two, that defenses respect enough to cover them? That would be, if it happens in his sophomore season, that would be so wild.
I'm not, that's why I mentioned it in that vein. Like I'm laughing it off because I don't think so. It's just, it's interesting to me how basically what we're really talking about without really talking about it, the big elephant in the room is really the lack of shooting capability of Castle. The fact that he's such a poor shooter, that's where the issue overarchingly lie. Like, because you're right, catch and shoot threes this year, 30.3%, 25%. That is just not great, man. And like he too was like, he's in that coming into this year. He was in that Josh Giddey camp last year of how bad of a shooter. That's where we are. That's horrible. So yeah, expecting him to make a major turnaround shooting wise, very much optimistic.
Do you have anything else on any of these teams before we skedaddle?
I do not. I think we went about it pretty thoroughly, to be honest with you.
Can you tell our fine listeners, subscribers, where they can find you and all the work that you do?
Yes, sir. You can find me over at Blue Sky, where I link to my work over at Yahoo, over at Forbes, and to the podcasts I do at the NBA Podcast and my Danish pod, Buster Peter.
Until next time, and as always, we leave the shout out to the one, the only, the real missing piece for the San Antonio Spurs, Mr. Frank Ntilikina.